Hello!
Hello.
I'm Mia.
I'm John.
You remembered. And we are Lemon Knife.
Yes.
And what are we doing today, John? Just look at your black book. What do we have on the schedule?
Oh, I was just miming reading. Because today we are reading some of our best reading.
This is our top 10 books, is what he's trying to say. Top 10 books of all time, and I am beginning.
Yes.
And I am beginning. I mean, as a children's librarian, I should maybe even have more children's books than I do on my list. This is one of two. But this is Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson. This was my absolute favorite book, as I know. I know. This was my favorite book as a kid. You know, really, it's only that one part that's so sad. Really, the rest of it is, it's heartfelt. It's heartwarming. It's, especially as someone who was bullied a lot when she first read it. That's not depressing at all.
Your list is dumb. Now you're being bullied again.
I have to go be a Bridge to Terabithia again and invent my forest world. And swing over the rope.
Only a loser would enjoy forest worlds. My number 10 is the Redwall series.
And not only that, but the protagonists aren't even human.
Alright, so this is my one, like, kind of from my youth. I mostly went for what I'd most enjoy now or something like that, but this is one that just, I read all of these as a kid. I would check, if the library ever got a new one, I'd check it out immediately.
Oh, yeah.
These were just these great, like, action, like, all the characters were mice and weasels and things, but they were just kind of these great, like, action-filled books. There were, like, sieges and betrayals. There would always be, like, chapters focusing on the villains, and the villains betray other villains, and it was great.
It's a fantastic series for being started by a bunch of animals. This is a series that we would probably, like, evaluate for a tween collection and be like, well, normally we don't include animals in our tween collection, but this one, you know.
Yeah. I have to read one of those again sometime.
Now I'm gonna have to, too, now that you, yeah. Alright, my number 9 is probably the most recently discovered, and this is for a very personal reason. The Courage to be Disliked is my number 9, so it's kind of, I'm reticent to even include it per se, because technically I think it's kind of a self-help book, but it's not a typical self-help book. It's not, you know, you can do it. You know, you should be like the sun. The sun rises every morning, no matter what.
Write your dreams in a journal.
Write your dreams in a journal, and see what your dreams look like from the perspective of the sun. But no, this one, I mean, first of all, it's written as a dialogue between a philosopher and a young hood rat who's gone to go see him. And this is the book that introduced me to Adlerian psychology, which saved my dang life. You know, it made me seek out Adlerian therapy, and I'm going to push the Adlerian thing, but my point is kind of thinking about things in an interpretive way rather than in a, okay, you're stuck in this world kind of a way, which is what a lot of these things come from. It's kind of like, you know, reframe it and see what you can do about it, and, you know, understand why you're feeling like this and reshape your role as a response kind of a thing. Rather than, you know, okay, this happened and you have to just understand this happened to you and deal with it and never get over it. Yeah, there's two different, very, very different ways of looking at it, and it helped me a lot.
Good job.
Thanks.
And don't worry, I dislike you.
Well, I better get my courage up. Now I've got a lot to
courage.
Oh no, it's just gonna happen to all my little sheets of drum notebook paper.
Alright, my number 9 is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller.
Oh, I was hoping it'd be another self-help
book.
No,
that would be a great follow-up. It can it'll self-help you to not trust the system.
I'm sure your friend Jimmy will be paying attention right about now. Hey Jimmy,
like,
shout out.
8 places too low.
Watch as he writes exactly that in the comments.
And yeah, just like great satire, you know, about like written about war, written just kind of really like fleshed out kind of like characters too. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, wrong wrong video. All right. Number 8 is my solo collection of short stories on the list. This is Welcome to the Monkey House by Kurt Vonnegut. And really, the centerpiece to me of Welcome to the Monkey House, and one of the biggest reasons it's on my top 10, is it contains my favorite short story of all time, which is Harrison Bergeron. It is one that makes me think every time I read it, and I always tend to wonder, in a world, especially now, where it's kind of being pushed as, oh, we're all the same, you know, forget our differences, we're all just human, and you kind of wonder how it's going to go if it gets pushed too far. Like, that can become a dystopia if you concentrate too much on the similarities, to the point where you're handicapping people, and, you know, you're a criminal for simply looking better than people, or being smarter than people, by nature.
Oh yeah, it all depends whether it becomes like, you know, ignore where everyone like started and their kind of attributes and focus on like what they're doing, or like ignore even that and just be like everyone.
It just kind of shows that anything can be pushed to dystopian levels, including something so innocent as, you know, seeing everyone as a human. But I mean, the other stories in this book are great, and Kurt Vonnegut is definitely one of my favorite authors. Just book or short story, just fantastic satirical stuff, biting wit, but still writing about some pretty dark things. I remember, the name of it escapes me, but the story about the chessboard and how it kind of turned into a torture device.
Oh yeah.
So a lot going on there.
Only a nerd would write about 50s science fiction to be on their list. My number 8 is The Moon is Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein.
That's what I was looking for.
This is one I just remember really enjoying, as I think I read as like a teenager or something like that. It's this kind of like sci-fi story, almost like libertarian kind of, like these people kind of like are living on the moon and being like oppressed by the earth, and then they kind of like rebel and make it into this like free society, and it's like a good book.
It's like a jungle. Sometimes the moon makes you wonder how you aren't written by Upton Sinclair. My number 7 is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Somehow I never got behind the rest of the Lord of the Rings quite as hard as I did The Hobbit. And they're still great books, but The Hobbit is just kind of the one that I feel like the rest of the Lord of the Rings should have felt like, almost. Like a fairy tale that involves riddles and adventures, and trying to convince somebody who doesn't like adventures to go on an adventure, and now he likes adventures, and he's gonna write his memoir about it. And I was so mad about the movies, and I had such high hopes, because Martin Freeman is like one of my favorite actors of all time, and he's playing Bilbo, and he's like, oh, and he's great in it, but like the movie, first of all, there are 3 of them.
9 hours of Hobbit, of course.
I don't understand, and like how much, it's a short book. But I mean, the Gollum sequence in The Hobbit is certainly my favorite part of the book, and one of my favorite parts of any book, where they're going back and forth with the riddles, and what have I got in my pocket, and eggs, which my dad and I still say to each other when we want breakfast. So what did you have for breakfast this morning, Dad? Eggs is precious. I love Gollum. What poor disadvantaged character.
Alright, I don't have a clever way to rip yours up and do mine, so...
I can rip it up for myself.
Very good. My number 7 is Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson. And this is kind of just a very zany sci-fi book. Like, there's a lot going on. It's set in like a near future. I think he might have been the person to coin using Avatar for people's representation in like a digital world. There's like a digital world. There's like a pizza delivery ninja.
What?
And his name is, well, this isn't a good element of it. His name is Hero Protagonist. And just like, it's kind of just, a lot of my top few books will be kind of these ones that have just a lot of stuff stirred in. And it is certainly an epitome of that, while built, like kind of very creative world building.
Well, now I do have to read, because like an amalgamation that you had before that was wrong, I had this amalgamated with the Hatchet books by
Huh,
Gary Paulson
yeah,
for
no,
some
it
reason.
is.
It's like, and I did not like the Hatchet books by Gary Paulson.
It is nothing like the Hatchet books by Gary Paulson.
Hatchet by Gary Paulson. The Hatchet books by Gary Paulson remind me of the worst times of 5th grade.
His name is Gary Paulson.
Gary Paulson.
His name is Gary
His
Paulson.
name's Gary Paulson. The power within.
Not quite on either of our movie or book lists.
His name is Gary Paulson.
I guess not even not quite on the book because I haven't read it. But anyway, what's your number 6?
Don't bother. Anyway, my number 6, we're moving a bit in the old obsolete direction. This is The Divine Comedy by Dante Algieri. This book sticks with me. I didn't specify a translation because almost all of them tend to be really good. I think the only one that wasn't very good was the one where they translated into prose, and it was just the lamest thing ever. Like, where he encounters Beatrice in the book and kind of reminds him of how he's done all these things wrong, but in the book's just like, and then I remembered Beatrice, and I thought about Beatrice, and she had blue eyes. I'm just kind of, but I mean, this was a big influence on our upcoming Prague suite about purgatory, or referring to purgatory.
Yeah.
Because of all the circles and everything. All the circles. The circles. And the way he wrote about it and stuck with me. And all the circles of hell, which I reference in idioms all the time. Yes, it sounds like What's next, John? I've gone on too long, I'm sorry.
No. All right, my number 6 is the Dark Tower series
good
by
choice.
Stephen King. And this is one that also is kind of very chaotic. It's kind of set in a medieval world, but that's got like portals to other worlds. So like the main team that assembles are like an old-timey gunslinger guy, then like wheelchair-ridden civil rights activist, and like kind of druggy grunge guy, and then they have to like save the day. And then later on in the series, Stephen King becomes a character. It's a whole thing. There's a lot of weird things, but I think just like overall, it's like another one with really like great, like consistent characters, just like these wild adventures. I think my sweet spot in it is like the middle books, once kind of like the core people are established, but before Stephen King becomes a character.
Yeah, I tend to like Stephen King when he's like at his least horror driven, I think.
That you would like these, then there's basically no horror.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I do want to give a shout out to Shawshank Redemption, which is one of my favorite short stories.
That's by him?
Yeah, that's by him.
Huh.
I didn't make the connection for years.
Huh. He's done a lot of stuff.
Yes, good on him. He didn't just write horror. Anyway, so my number 5, what's funny is that his other well-known book actually showed up in my movies, but number 5 anyway is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This one was definitely the one to kind of strike me at the core. I guess this one has animals in it, but it is most definitely not a kid's book. Why would you ever mistake it for one? Just all the different...
I'm sure tons of like kids have been mistakenly given Animal Farm.
Oh
yeah, here, Bobby, here's a book about piggies.
The worst thing is that in the 70s they made it an animated film, just like in the style of like Charlotte's Web movie, and it's horrifying.
Maybe that's the idea.
Why would you give that to a kid? Maybe that's the idea.
Well, maybe the idea is for it to be horrifying, not for it to be given to a kid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is horrifying for an adult. It's supposed to be horrifying for an adult. Just don't give it to a kid. There's really way too many possible mistakes to be made there. But yeah, fantastic commentary, fantastic book.
All right, my number 5 that will also be on Mia's list. This is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. And these are just kind of comedic. Well, actually, you probably have them ranked higher, so let's save it for when you get to that.
Okay.
What's your number 4?
Number 4 is The Giver by Lois Lowry, my other book originally aimed at kids to make it onto my list. I read this book, I think, at like 5 different points in my life, all of them entirely different from each other, and every time it just gets me about here. It's fantastic dystopian writing for kids, but it could very well be for an adult, and knowing this is the one to introduce the dystopian worlds to kids and young adults that kind of bore the whole Hunger Games deal since then. Lots of them have come past,
Yeah,
but
it's kind of one of those ones where it
better.
feels cliche just because like so many things have borrowed from it.
But then once you realize it was the first, really,
Yeah.
and just how well built it was and how well written for a child it was and how well written just all through the years, it ages with the person. It does.
All right, my number 4 is...
What?
I'm just making sure there weren't like a bunch
Oh.
of paper noises.
Sorry.
All right, my number 4 is the entire kind of Ender's Game world and all of those books.
That's the name of the series?
The entire Ender's Game and all of those things. Also, I'm Awful. By Orson Scott Card.
That's the subtitle.
Yup.
It's in about 8-point font.
It's one of the incredible things where it manages to be written by this horrible person, despite I would almost feel like one of the core like lessons of Ender's Game is like kind of like a lot of things that wouldn't go with being like a nut job conservative, like mistrusting the military and like showing empathy towards all life forms and things like that. And yet, and this is just kind of, the original is like a classic, like almost like a young adult book if you're fine with some people being bludgeoned to death.
You'd be surprised.
Still all-time like great twist. And then the 2 series that branch out from it are both fantastic and both really different from each other. There's the Ender books where he's like on this like alien world and there's this complex alien life cycle and I have to figure out kind of like a way to keep the planet from being destroyed and like figure out what's going on there. And then there's like the ones set back on Earth with the Bean character, and those are more like kind of like political, military, like Tom Clancy almost kind of sci-fi books. And just his like created characters, his dialogue are all like great and just like a fantastic world.
Yeah, that's another one with like young characters that easily appeals to anyone.
Yeah. And then he went on to write Empire, one of the worst books ever.
You were on a roll, man. What
Yep.
did you do? All right. Number 3 is, we're going back to me as a folklore mythology nerd, The Odyssey by Homer. And I noted the Robert Fitzgerald translation, which is, I think, popularly used in colleges and was the one I read first and is really well told.
What kind of era of guy is Robert Fitzgerald?
Like 50s or so.
Okay.
I think the main criticism people have with it is like making God say things like "got off scot-free," and it's like I don't really see the problem. But it's I mean, the Odyssey is the original adventure as far as, I mean, it's not technically the original adventure. I guess it'd be Epic of Gilgamesh, but it's the original like epic adventure to kind of bear all epic adventures. All of the hero's journey deals kind of came from this. Shout out, by the way, to Joseph Campbell, whose Hero of a Thousand Faces almost made it. Yeah, fantastic adventure, and things you'll see redone over and over again in any tropes.
I almost feel like this list is the opposite of our movie list. It's like your list has all these classics, and mine is like,
yes.
And there's aliens.
And then there's aliens. Yeah, but my stupid forest world, right?
All right. My number 3 is The Naked Singularity, or just Naked Singularity. This is the most recent book, I think, probably of either of our lists, by Sergio de la Pava. And this is just this phenomenal, I think it's his debut book. It's just this, like, it's kind of like a lot of my top movies, and it's got a lot of different moods. Like, it's about this New York lawyer, and then he gets involved in this elaborate heist, but also he's trying to prevent this person on death row from being executed. And
there's a lot of but alsos, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot of but alsos, and it's got some of the most depressing little segments of books ever, and then it's got, like, comedy. Oh, and there's a whole thing where the author talks about, like, the career of this one boxer over the course of the book.
Huh.
It's
that
just
sounds interesting.
yeah, it's incredibly well written. It's like the author is fantastic at doing both like comedy and like incredibly dark. Like I feel like his one segment in the later part of it could almost be like a standalone, incredibly depressing short story that would win like some awards.
Mm-hmm. And once again, I'd have to detach a little bit if I were to, in order to revisit that, because I can't detach it in my head from Naked Lunch, which is terrifying. Which then I can't detach from the movie Naked Gun, which is the entire opposite of it. Sounds like both.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, actually, I guess the entire opposite wouldn't be too far wrong.
Yeah. But then I feel like Naked Lunch is opposite from both those things in a very different way.
Maybe they're all opposites from each other.
They're the triangle of opposites. Why do you have so many sides? There's only 3 things. It can just be a triangle. Why it's gotta be an octopus? Anyway, so yeah, coming back around, this is
this
where...
could be more classiness? Oh no, this is Hitchhiker's Guide.
Hitchhiker's
yes.
Guide to the Galaxy mentioned before. So what do you like about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Jalen? Let's have a quick mini panel.
Just like the writing really is the number one. Like just so many little like puns, asides, and quips.
It does manage to be quality sci-fi while absolutely being one of the funniest books ever written.
Just yeah, and like the kind of the weird ensemble.
Oh, I love the ensemble to bits.
I don't
Great
know.
panel.
Yeah, great panel.
But yeah, just like the wacky characters, how everything starts happening. But really just from the beginning, even on Earth. I mean, Arthur Dent is first seen lying in front of a bulldozer, having his house avoid getting torn down, and then suddenly he's abducted by his actor friend, who he didn't realize was an alien, and they go there and they meet his ex-romantic interest, who is now the wife of the most arrogant alien there ever was, and running for president of something, and then they're on a ship together, and lots of stuff is happening.
I think it's moved into like kind of the established classics, which is great to the extent that either in English class or on like an English exam, there was like a portion of it. It was the portion about like, it was, I think, Arthur talking to the building people about like, he's trying to find the permit or something, and he has to go into like the sub-basement guarded by leopards and something like that.
Oh yes, there are so many great, once again, I think like the continued plot throughout the book doesn't matter as much as just like the vignettes tying into it.
Yeah.
The falling bowl of poinsettias and and of course Marvin. How could I leave this?
Of course, you forgot Marvin.
Yeah.
Who would remember me?
I'm sorry, buddy.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, my number 2 is the longest series on here. This is kind of, well, maybe Redwall, I don't know. This is I just called the Fitz Universe series by Robin Hobb. This is 5 trilogies, and they are all completely each trilogy kind of fits together, but it's completely different from the other. It's like the first, third, and fifth focus on like the life of this assassin, but it goes from him kind of like as a young assassin being mentored, then he's kind of like middle-aged, getting drawn back into things, and then he's like much older and kind of like looking back on things. And then the second and fourth trilogies, which I think are my favorites, are set in a completely different side of the world, where they're kind of like these like boat people, and they're kind of more of like a Game of Thrones style, like jumping between. That should have made my list. But like jumping between like kind of various like characters' perspectives and just kind of them all intersecting in various ways. And I think she does a really good job of having it kind of like it's just on the right side of the line for you. Where I tend to not like fantasy things where it's like you kind of know how it's all going to turn out. Like you know the heroes are going to win. And a lot of hers you kind of know that like, you know, this main character isn't going to get killed off right away. But like you don't know exactly how things are going to shape out, or maybe things work out good but poorly for the world or something.
Like a Pyrrhic victory, yeah.
Yeah, and like how the characters' lives are going to take shape.
Yeah, so far I've only read the first one, but I have a whole scroll of things to read post-graduation, so I loved it. But yeah, on to my number one, which I guess is technically 2 books, but I feel like...
I was going to guess The Giver, so now I'm not sure.
You can't really have one without the other, in my opinion. One continues
the Old and
the
New
other.
Testament.
Oh boy! Did I mention Jimmy's gonna doubly invalidate your list now, by the way? Because you...
because he hates that book, yeah.
If we ever become famous, his comments are gonna become someone's meme.
Yes.
Someone's gonna... Anyway, number 1 is The Color of Magic / The Light Fantastic.
Right, Discworld, of course.
Terry Pratchett. Yes. I will never forget how I realized not that many people like this book that much. So I'm going to this meetup, and I'm supposed to be like, oh, I'm a librarian, yes, because it's like a geek women meetup. There's another librarian there. We start talking books at a book club in front of people, and we were talking about, oh, we should maybe read a Terry Pratchett book for a future book club. And I'm like, oh, you can start with The Color of Magic. And the other librarian's like, no, that's a bad one. And I'm just like, and I was like, why is everyone agreeing with her? Come on! Why do I always have to be girls?
That's a bad one, Mia.
But I love this. I love these books. I mean, certainly the other ones got deeper, okay? Like, he got to be a more substantial writer as time went on. But the introduction to the world, first of all, the imagery created... Rincewind...
It almost feels more cosmic than the later one. Like, I've just read that one and, like, some scattered ones. And, I don't know, the other ones feel more like action comedies. Like, that one almost feels, like, more weird because it's kind of at that higher step.
Yeah, it's, like, weird, but it's already introducing... Like, Rincewind might be my favorite book character of all time. Even though his job is to meet more interesting people, right? He's the one going around and kind of ferrying these messages and just the ultimate everyman in any book. Just, he doesn't really feel like he should be anywhere. Why is he into this? And then Two Flower, the Discworld's first tourist, is one of the best characters ever. And, oh my goodness, I could go on. Stop me. Please.
Stop.
Okay.
Okay, my number 1
is...
What's that?
I'm curious now.
Infinite Jest. By David Foster Wallace. And this is very much in a similar camp to Naked Singularity in that I think it's just, like, really good writing and it takes on a lot of things. This one's incredibly long. It's full of, like, footnotes that kind of, like, flesh out the world. It's set in, like, a near future. And it's almost like... There wouldn't even be, like, a thing I would describe the plot is, because it's told, like, all out of order. Like, describing it sounds really pretentious. And maybe it is, but it's just also, it's just like, I love like how it's written and like how it's told. Like I remember like I read the first chapter, it's kind of slow, and the second chapter it was describing like this kind of like, just like the thought process of this like drug addicted guy, and like I had never like been in his shoes or anything, but it was just like, wow, this is like so good. Like I'm like so seeing the world through this guy's eyes. Like I gotta read the rest of this. And then he has a lot of chapters in the style that I really like. If I ever write anything, I'll probably do a lot of this where it's just all dialogue. And so it kind of really gets to the point, because a lot of times dialogue is the most entertaining part. So he does some of that. He does some of these longer things going into people's minds. It's just like
quite an epic from what I understand.
Wild journey.
This is near the top of the I have to read these now that I'm done with my degrees list, because that one's amazing.
All right, and those are our books.
The end.
The end.
Hey!